Bob mentioned I worked at Department of Natural Resources, and when you work at the Department of Natural Resources, you find out pretty much everything is an emergency, even if people knew about it for a long time. So that being the case, one of the things that I found out back in those days working with DNR was that a lot of people, they know an emergency could happen, but they just don't plan for it because they think the emergency is going to happen to the other guy. And farmers are no different from that. You know, we deal with those situations all the time, but we keep thinking it's somebody else. But it's really important that you do have a good emergency plan. An emergency plan is like insurance. You buy it hoping you are never going to use it. Your intent is to never use it, but when you need it, you really need it bad, and there's no do-overs. Okay, one of the things I wanted to point out, this is one of the principles of responsible pork production. If you're PQA certified, which I think just about everybody needs to be PQA certified now, if you've got PQA certification, just having an emergency action plan is one of the principles of responsible pork production. So there's one good reason to do it. Okay, another reason that I really like to see producers have an emergency action plan is because of some of the situations I've dealt with and some of the situations I've heard about. You're the guy or you're the person or the farmer who needs to do the emergency action plan, but you've got it in your head and you know how to handle a situation. But the problem is, on some of these emergencies, you may not be the one there to activate that emergency plan that you've got in your head. So you dump that plan, it's left over on your wife, it's left on the kids, it's left on the neighbors. Okay, so we don't want that to happen. The other thing is, we don't want the regulatory agencies to come in and activate our emergency plan for us. Having been with a regulatory agency, let me tell you, it is a bad thing when they come in and take over your operation. It's not something you want to happen. Okay, if you don't have an emergency action plan, go to pork.org, Pork Board, the checkoff plan, or checkoff program. They have a template for emergency action plans and a lot of information on there. We're not going to be able to develop a full plan today. I'm just trying to get you all motivated, get you excited about having this plan so you're going to go home and do it. And you're going to need a lot of resources to get it done. Pork Board is a good place to go to get some of those resources to get help. I found this sign in a magazine. It was real interesting. This is actually at, if I can make the pointer work, Fisher Hog Farm. Yeah, that's Fisher Hog Farms out in Vaz County and former Missouri Pork Association president. Real neat idea. I don't know where he got this. I haven't seen it elsewhere, but you know, the neat thing about the bad thing about emergency action plans is that typically you got to be able to read them. A lot of folks keep them in the barn. And if you're going to have an emergency, where's it going to be? In the barn. So your plan's at risk. They've got theirs setting outside. Anybody drives onto that farm, it's right there at their biosecurity stop point. You can pull that. They've got a sign that tells you what's in there. You can pull that emergency action plan out. The local fire department, any of your first responders can get that, other members of the family, your neighbors, anybody that needs it. It's a really good idea. I think I'd call that a good management practice. We're going to talk about, our most likely emergencies that we're going to have on a farm are going to be mass animal mortality, a manure discharge or spill, or a burned or collapsed building, which invariably leads to the first one again. All these things they're really big incidents. We read about them in the papers every once in a while, and again, we don't think they'll happen to us, but you know, every once in a while somebody finds out they can happen to anybody. Okay, first challenge. What's anybody see here? Oh, I should point out something too. Another disclaimer here. I got lots of disclaimers for this over. If you see a picture of your farm in my slides, don't start jumping up hollering, why you got a picture of my farm in your slides? Because right now, you and I are the only ones that know it, but if you jump up and holler that, everybody in the room is going to know. Okay, what's anybody see here?
Curtains are down.
Curtains are down. What is that?
It's tunnel ventilation.
Okay, just finisher site, right?
Yeah.
Fairly new?
Yeah.
Okay, is that the kind of finisher site you like to have? Okay, that's pretty good one. That finisher site's not very old. You know, latest equipment, things really look good there. Well, the day I drove up to that finisher site, things weren't quite so good. 9:30 in the morning, it was 101 degrees. The high temp was predicted to be 105 that day. This was August 2011. High temp predicted to be 105 with the heat index 110 or 112 by 2 p.m. 4,800 head finisher. And when the owner of that farm drove up, got out of the truck, dead silence. There wasn't even a bird chirping. No feed augers, no fan motors, no pigs squealing, nothing. What's that tell you? They're dead. Every one of them dead. You add those conditions up, they're dead. Okay, when you walk in that door, you know you're going to find dead pigs. Folks, let me tell you, you have no idea what it looks like until you actually walk into that situation. I walked into the barn, and I got there 7 hours after the producer found it, and not much had been done. But when you walk in and you see an entire room of pigs laying there dead, and they're inflated, and they're turning purple, you can't even imagine this on movies. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that Hollywood people would pay a lot to get footage of because it would look so good on these horror movies they show. It is awful. And the next feeling you have is, I mean, it's just like the world ended because what are you going to do with them? Okay? You're supposed to start shipping next week. You know you're not going to be shipping because, you know, in this case, half the pigs were dead all across the building, already starting to bloat. Pigs dead for 7 hours, they don't stay in the same condition. We know we're going to ship those pigs next week. What's that tell us about them? Big. Really big. Okay? How big does a bloated pig, a market hog, how big will that thing get?
3 times its size.
I was going to say double, Danny, but 3 times, yeah, I might be right. They're big, they're really bad to handle. So what do you do, okay? And that's our challenge here. We're going to figure out how to respond to an incident like this. Okay, that is not a picture from this incident. The incident I went to, I did not take pictures. I was really concerned. I saved 1 or 2 pictures. I was really concerned about doing any pictures from this thing, and we told people not to take pictures there, so I didn't feel good about doing it. Looking back, I wish I had for the training purposes, because like I said, until you go in there, you can't really imagine it, and it's hard for me to describe it. But that is from a flood incident in North Carolina about 15 years ago. And that kind of gives you an idea of what we're looking at, what we're dealing with. So we're going to develop just an off-the-cuff plan for responding to something like this and show you some of the detail goes into these things. Okay, that is a picture from that incident. And the pigs start there, and they go all the way to there. And that's only part of them. And we were lucky in this incident, we only lost half of the pigs in the barn. There were about 2,400 dead, about 2,400 left. Interesting thing about it, which pigs do you suppose, what do you suppose was a determining factor in whether a pig survived there?
Placement in the barn.
That was an interesting observation. I wish I had my airheads because you and I would both get one because that wasn't the placement in the barn. The live pigs were scattered throughout that barn. It's the craziest thing I ever saw. You'd have a pen full of dead pigs, there'd be 3 or 4 pigs live laying out there in the middle of them. Couldn't get to water, couldn't get to feed, laying there for hours, or sitting there for hours. It's amazing to me, because I would have thought placement, it wasn't placement. Anybody else got a guess?
Size.
What?
Size.
Size. The small pigs lived.
Yeah.
The lighter the pig, the more of those survive. The big pigs, a lot of respiration, a lot of heat buildup, they went fast. Okay, so I was talking about shipping. You know, they're supposed to start shipping in a week. It was a long time before they shipped out of this barn again. We had to get all those pigs out. That's kind of where we were at with things. Okay, first off, how long do you have to dispose of the carcasses? Then you got to think about who you got to notify, like you're all talking about. You got to talk about what options you got, like digging the hole or do we compost them or whatever. And then you got to talk about how we're going to get those carcasses out of there. Okay, does anybody know? Danny, your side got an answer?
Only 24 hours.
24 hours? Doug, what's your side say?
24.
24. Now, good thing I don't have enough chocolate because y'all will be eating me out of house and home. By state statute and regulation, you have 24 hours to dispose of a dead animal from the time that you knew or should have known that it was dead. You can't say, I didn't know they were dead if you didn't do chores that day. You should have known. 24 hours, and it doesn't matter if that's one pig or if it's 5,000 pigs. It's still 24 hours. That's why we need to get this plan in place. Okay, who do we have to notify? And somebody said, Danny said me, which is Cargill. Okay, in my case, or in Danny's and Dave's and some other folks in here, that's the case. You got to notify your field manager, or if you've got an integrator. Who else? Somebody said DNR. Okay, anybody else you can think of real quick before I turn this?
Your dozer man, or depending on your way of.
He's your best friend. Okay, who do you have to notify? First off, you better notify the owner of the pigs. If they're not your pigs, if you contract hogs, then you need to notify that person. They're going to want to know what kind of loss they've had. What about neighbors? You going to notify your neighbors? Maybe. Let me tell you why I say maybe. Neighbors can be the best asset in this case. They can be your worst nightmare in this case. And we saw that in this situation. We headed it off, but we saw that that could have been the case here. State veterinarian. And I tell you to call the state veterinarian before you call DNR, and there's a reason for that. Does anybody want to guess it?
So he can get there before DNR does?
Exactly. There's more to that. The state veterinarian is a person that's got animal experience. The person that from DNR that comes out. Again, remember, I worked at DNR 14 years, and I worked with a lot of people. A lot of folks didn't understand why I worked there because they said a Republican couldn't work at DNR. I told them I wasn't a Republican. I was too conservative to be a Republican. But when you have somebody from DNR show up, there's a real likelihood this will be their first time on a farm.
Yeah.
And they may not have ever handled pigs. All they know is they went to college and they got a degree and they know how to save the world and protect the environment, and they're going to have you do it. You're going to need that state veterinarian there to help you with that. State veterinarian is your friend in this situation. Now, I want to qualify this real quick. If you know, I think I've got a slide on this. If you know, now I haven't got the one I thought. If you know that you are going to be able to get those pigs on a truck, on a rendering truck, and get them out of there, you can skip that DNR notification. You can probably skip the state veterinarian notification unless that renderer is going to want a health statement or something. But if you don't need to notify DNR, that's okay. But don't hesitate. If there's any question, notify them first. Don't let them hear about this from somebody else. They need to hear it from you. Okay, we're talking about neighbor notification. What you're seeing there is a large dirt mound. That's the top of the track hoe behind it. Gives you an idea of how tall it is. You can see it was within a couple of feet at the top of the eaves over there, the top of the roof line over there, the bottom of the roof line. A nice cornfield over here. What happened in this incident we were dealing with, this guy had not done his landscaping work. After he built his barn, he still had a large mound of dirt built up there. And he got on his dozer and he turned that mound of dirt sideways right across there. And the reason he did that was to keep anybody from driving by seeing what was going on. Okay, now it's not that we had a secret operation or anything going on here, but you really don't need a lot of people driving by, gawking, coming and getting in the way. Do you want something like this to end up on the 6 o'clock evening news in photographs? Because it could. What happened in this case, it was actually kind of comical. This is one of the counties with the health ordinance. This guy's commissioners drove by. They came down. I don't know if they thought they were going to straighten things out or just wanted to see if it's getting taken care of. Or, if they just, they'd never seen a train wreck before. I'm not sure. But this guy had thrown this block up across here. The commissioners drove by and they wouldn't even stop. And they were real frustrated because they couldn't see what was going on. And they didn't hang around. They just turned around and left. right there, that showed me, that was the one time I was glad somebody didn't finish their landscaping, but it showed me one of the things we need to consider in this is how we only let out the information, we manage the information that we want to get out there, okay? We want to manage the situation, and having a lot of people around doesn't help with our management on it. Now, not all of you are going to have a big mound of dirt that you can move. What do you got that you can put in place that you can make a visual screen like that?
Big round bales of hay.
Big round bales. What, somebody over here have an answer?
Equipment.
Equipment, cars, pickups, trucks. Anything you got to block that screen, to just block the vision will do it. And remember, if somebody shows up, if there's a regulatory authority that shows up, they've got, justified jurisdiction and a reason to be there. I'm not saying hold back any secrets for them. I'm just saying that you all don't hang your dirty laundry out on the clothesline out along the road for everybody to see. Same situation here, okay? Disposal. Dave, a while ago, talked a little bit about composting. I think Dan or somebody back here said burial. What options we got to get rid of all these carcasses in 24 hours?
Rendering.
Rendering. It's a good one if we can get it. What else?
Incineration.
We're going to talk about incineration. Dave, as good an answer as that is, that one would have got an airhead. Don't feel bad.
Yeah,
Airheads ain't too bad. I ain't
possibility,
touching.
I mean.
What?
It is a possibility if it's your only way out.
On a massive, we'll get to that one. We'll get to that one. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying we're going to discuss more. Best advantage rendering. What I like about rendering is it's real quick and it's pretty clean. If you can get them there. You got no mess left on your farm. As quick as you can get those pigs out and get them in the truck, guys driving down the road with them, they're done. Doesn't take a lot of equipment to do it. All you need is that rendering truck to show up.
Why can't you use your own truck if you got it?
I'm glad you asked that because that was in the notes. I was supposed to print it out and didn't. You can use your own truck. You can hire dump trucks. What you need to do in that case, and I wish somebody from the Department of Ag was in here or from APHIS was in here to comment on this, but if you are going to use vehicles, okay, you can transport your own animals, dead animals, in your vehicle, okay? If you are transporting animals that belong to somebody else, and the contractor relationship's a bit of a gray area, but if you're transporting animals that belong to somebody else, or if you are using a for-hire vehicle, in other words, if you hire the guy down the road to bring his dump trucks up and haul for you, you need to contact the state veterinarian's office. Remember, number 2 contact. Contact state veterinarian's office. They will give you, over the phone, they will give you a temporary permit to transport dead animals. And you're going to have 2 requirements. All those animals, it has to be covered to keep any animals from being viewable from the roadway. And it's got to be watertight. You can't have dead pig juice dripping down on the highway as you drive down the road, okay? And remember, we want to keep this, we want to keep this low key as we can. So that cover thing is a good idea. Having that leak-proof truck is a good idea. So one of the things you may want to put in your emergency plan, have some plastic available to line the back of that truck so you don't have stuff leaking out the back of it. Have some plastic, black plastic, to cover the top of that truck if you need to. You may need to duct tape that stuff down and keep the plastic in place, but that's a good line. If you've got your own trucks, use them. And I'll tell you what, why you want to do that. Disadvantage to rendering, availability. This incident we had happen, one of Cargill's contract growers, when they called, said, what do we do? First thing I said was, well, get out the emergency action plan that I told you to develop. Well, we're past that already. Okay. Second thing I said, call your renderer. Well, he hadn't thought of that. He'd already called. Okay, this was summer of 2011 when it was really hot. Every renderer in Iowa and Illinois was absolutely full of dead poultry and dead cattle, and quite a few dead hogs. Just routine animal mortalities from the heat was filling the renderers up. The guy said when he called, they said, well, I can get you 1 truck which will hold maybe 200 hogs every 4 hours. Well, we got 2,400 hogs we got to dispose of in 24 hours. That ain't going to work. Okay? So, rendering's not always available. if you do have rendering, it's going to cost you. They're probably going to make you pay freight on those dead animals. And it may be worth that. It may not be that bad, but it's something you got to consider, whether you want to do that. Another thing is biosecurity. Do you want your rendering truck coming on the farm? Yeah, that's something you've got to consider into your operation. If you've got a sow farm, you probably don't want that rendering truck on the place. Okay, if it's a commercial finisher, you got hogs ready to go to market, and biosecurity may not be quite as big a concern. On the other hand, if you are worried about biosecurity, well, you need to tell the rendering guy about his trucks before he sends them out. Wash them. At least wash the outsides of them. Stop them where you want them stopped out in the driveway. You want this guy back in his truck, clear up against your barn. You know, do you want a truck that's been on another hog farm a little bit? Maybe they've got trucks that normally just run to dairy or feedlots or run to poultry operations. A couple things you want to consider there.
Jerry?
Yes.
What are they doing in biosecure when in a situation like this, when them hogs are being taken out the door, side doors, and are people going in and out? I mean, biosecurity's pretty well been broke there.
Not to the extent that a rendering truck will breach it, but yes, it has been. I mean, you want to know who's on your place, you want to know who's dealing with it, kind of where they've been. But yeah, when we get to one of these situations, biosecurity is about 50 to 75% breached. And I'd say a rendering truck knocks it over the rest of the 25% for 100% complete breach, having a rendering truck back up against your barn. Yeah, it's a good point.
Isn't that the least of your worries for the time being, though?
I'm on the fence about that. I mean, yes, this is an emergency situation, and you don't want the public down here dealing with it. You don't want regulatory agencies coming after you. But on the other hand, we got to be in business. You know, those dead pigs are going to be gone, and we got to stay in business here, you know, beyond that. That's why I say on a commercial finisher, it may not be a big deal, but if it's a sow farm, you know, then it's more of a concern. Especially if you lost everything, maybe not as big a deal because you can pretty much clean things up. But if half your animals are still alive, we got a little worries. What?
They could just go to market.
Well, if we're dealing with a sow farm or a genetic, like a gilt finish or something like that, a little more concerned. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying there's points we need to consider, and you're bringing up a very valid point. When we breach biosecurity this bad, is that our biggest worry, or do we have other things? Maybe we can continue our business on. That's one of the reasons I bring up rendering. Rendering will cause less disruption to your business, with the exception of biosecurity, than any of the other methods. That's why I like rendering. I talk about it first. Composting is a viable option. The environmental wacko in me likes the composting option. It's pretty quick. It's pretty clean. You get some benefit back out of this stuff. Not a bad way to go. Got to design your composting system right. But there's some downsides to composting. I'll go back for a minute. Got a great big pile of stuff out here. You can see here the guy, he's built his bed, the carbon material, got his birds all laid on it. They're going to go cover them up with stuff. Who wants that stuck out in the middle of their operating area? Now you got to drive around this thing. Also, you'll notice all the leachate coming out of it. That's all got to be managed. So the downside to composting is the day the pigs die is just the beginning. Okay, we're going to have that pile there most likely 6 months minimum. So when you do that, you've got to pick out a good spot where it's not going to interfere with your farm operations, where you can manage the leachate. A couple of other things we got to think about. Where are you going to get all this stuff? A pile of 2,500 dead pigs, and remember, you can only put them, I'd recommend 2. You can put them 3, stack them 3 deep. You need to have about a foot in between each pig. Okay, it's going to be a big pile for 2,500 market hogs. It's going to be a mess. It's going to be tall, it's going to be wide, it's going to be long. Okay, so probably one of the places you want to put that is out in the middle of one of your fields, in a pasture or in a cornfield or a bean field, someplace where it's not in the way. Because you don't want to mess with this thing right there around the farmstead all the time. The other problem is, where are you going to get all that material? You're going to need chopped straw, or you're going to need wood chips, or silage, or you're going to need something to bury these things with, to cover them with for your composting. Who's got 25 tons of silage laying around that they don't need? Or got 25 tons, got enough big bales laying around and got a chopper that they can run them through to chop this stuff all up? Because I can tell you right now, just unrolling big bales or unrolling straw bales will not work very well for composting. It'll at least double and probably triple the time it takes to compost. That stuff doesn't work good, it maps down. So you need to chop this stuff up. A lot of work involved with composting. So that's probably the reason that it's very rarely used. Okay? Burial. It's my least favorite, but it's the one that gets used the most because we can get it done. We're farmers, we're used to moving dirt, we've got equipment, or we know people that have got equipment, and we got land, so we can probably get it done. Now, somebody earlier talked about notifying DNR, and I said, why? And they said, because you got DNR to approve. And I think I've got handouts with me, or I hope I've got them with me. Don't wait until the pigs die to figure out where you're going to bury them. Wrong time to make the decision. Had this happen on another site. Wife at the farm and I just about got into a fist fight because I wanted to bury pigs in a hay field in a good spot. She wanted to bury pigs on the side of the hill in a rocky spot. Didn't work out too well. State vet had to step in and break it up. Then DNR came in and said, neither one of those sites is very good. You're going to put them over there. So you want to have that site picked out. The good news about that, DNR, Division of Geology Land Survey, will come in and evaluate a site for you. It won't cost you anything. Might take a little bit to get to it, but if you'll send them, and I think I've got some forms with me. If I don't, you can get it off the internet, but if you will contact DNR, they will come down and they will evaluate a site for you, and you'll have it all picked out. I recommend you pick out 2 sites, just in case. Real good thing to do. DGLS, DNR. DNR can, on occasion, be your friend. This is one of those cases. One of the things we want to avoid is stuff like this. I know that's a little bit out of focus, but can anybody tell me what they see there?
My wife's cookies.
Wife's cookies? Okay, let me ask you. That is good. I missed that, but it sounded really funny.
No sex tonight.
Okay. Your wife's cookies are baked like that. When you dunk them, will they absorb anything?
No, I'm getting picked up.
Okay. That is exactly what we ran into right there. That stuff right there indicates that that is a hydric soil. It does not do well with wet stuff. It doesn't absorb it. That's actually iron that's built up, and then a gray layer. That's rust, and that's a gray layer. When this farmer started working on this, he called and he said, what am I supposed to do? And I told him several things to do, and he did absolutely everything I told him not to do. I told him, you find a spot just as high as you can on the landscape, the top of a ridge, in a cornfield, out away from the barns, with good soil that's well drained, and don't you dig that hole over 6 feet deep. I got there. I hope I've got a picture of it. Yeah. There was the hole he dug to dispose of pigs. Right behind the barn, in a waterway, in clay soil, at the edge of the cornfield, at the bottom of the hill. And he spent hours digging this. See that shiny stuff? Does anybody know what that is?
Water.
Groundwater. Not just water. That was not surface running. That was groundwater. He dug, and the hole was 8 to 10 feet deep, not 6 feet. So he did it all wrong. Lord, I hope he's not in the room today. Anyway, now this guy was lucky in that he did some excavation contracting, and he had a dozer and 2 excavators available on site. So when I got there, he was so wrapped up and upset over this whole thing. He was sitting on the equipment digging instead of making decisions like he should have been, and he was making bad decisions when he did. He dug that hole. I walked down and looked at it, and I said, that's not going to work. The DNR guy showed up about 3 hours later. He looked at it and said, there ain't no way. You're not burying pigs there. So he spent about 4 hours, and I don't know how many $100 in fuel digging a hole that he couldn't use, and we made him move the hole over. If you bury pigs in that, they will not break. Pigs don't break down very fast when you bury them anyway. But if you buried pigs in that, they would mummify and they would leach into groundwater, and I guarantee you somebody would have a problem with that. So again, we have to pick that site where we're going to bury those pigs. And there's a lot of considerations, and we need to pick it beforehand.
Can that be wider than that? I know it can't be any steeper than 6 foot, but can it be wider?
What I would like to see on a burial trench is that you dig that thing so that those pigs, so that it's only wide enough for 2 pigs, because the pigs in the middle, the wider the area that's buried, the less breakdown you have in them. So I would rather see several narrow trenches than one wide one. But as you'll see what happened with this one, we got a wide trench. We ended up burying the pigs in this area, in here. The soil was marginally better. If you go for total elevation, he was kind of deep, but again, we were in a bit of a waterway, so by the time he graded it the way it was supposed to be, we probably weren't more than 6 feet deep anywhere. Not an ideal spot, but, you know, an order of magnitude better than where he started digging. Okay, but it still wasn't what I wanted, but yeah, it ended up pretty wide. Okay, another thing while I got the picture of dozers on here real quick. One of the things you find out on burying these dead animals, you all know why you can't throw whole tires into a landfill, don't you? They come up, they catch gas in there, and they float, and they come up through the dirt, through the liner. Dead pigs do the same thing. Okay, if you bury a whole dead pig, they'll float up. They'll actually move dirt. So what do you got to do to take care of that problem? Poke a hole in them. Found out poking a hole in a pig that's been dead for 12 hours is not a pleasant task. What we did find out though is if you run, I can't remember what that is. I think that's a D6. It's like somebody probably knows what that is. If you run one of those over a dead pig one time, they'll poke their own hole. Okay? Nobody's ever going to want to buy that tractor, but you'll have a hole in the pig. Okay, every farm needs to have a prearranged mass mortality disposal site. I was talking about that a while ago. DGLS will evaluate it for you. That's the place you can go to get that form to request that evaluation. You can landfill pigs. Trouble with landfilling, it's not real likely. You can also incinerate, like Dave was talking about, but if we go with landfilling, we're talking about paying freight we were talking about paying freight a while ago on rendering. It's worse on landfilling. You've got to pay the freight for the thing, and then when the pig gets to the landfill, you got to pay their tipping charge, which is at least $20 a ton. So now you're paying 2 different ways on disposing these pigs, and you got to arrange with that landfill before they get there that they'll even take them. You can't just show up with 2,500 dead pigs and say, "Hi, I'm here, I need to unload." They need to know those things are coming. You probably better check with them again in advance, find out they're going to do it. So landfilling's not real likely. Incineration, you know, Richard Pryor, you all know who Richard Pryor is. You know, he got burned real bad several years ago messing around with drugs, and he once said, "Fire's inspirational, they should use it in the Olympics." Okay, he's right. The trouble with fire, I mean, it cleans everything up. You got this nice whole burned area that everything's gone if you do it right. But when you try to incinerate 2,500 dead hogs, it's going to take gobs and oodles of fuel that you probably don't have on hand. Where are you going to get all of that? If you bring in an engineered constructed incinerator device, which EPA used one of those to incinerate a bunch of soil years ago, you have to have what's called an air curtain destructor. So you can dig a trench, throw the pigs in, throw lots of wood on them. Then you got to have this big thing that blows air in there that keeps this from burning and smoking and throwing up all this particulate matter. It's really regulated, and it's a real mess. So it's not likely we're going to use incineration as much as I'd like to see it done. Okay, how do you get pigs from barn to disposal? Alicia, you want to go through that demonstration again?
Yeah, I got a better way this time.
Okay, what do you recommend? Gonna roll them? Okay. Okay, I'll tell you folks that when I got to this incident, 7 hours later, they had to remove maybe 100 out of the 2,400 pigs, and we're clicking off hours here, and I'm getting real nervous. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm talking to the DNR guy, I'm talking to the state vet, they're asking me, when's this gonna be cleaned up? And if you can't get it done, we can. The state has an environmental contractor on retainer, and if there's a problem, they will call out that contractor, whether it's hazardous waste or manure spills, whatever. They can call those folks in. If the DNR folks don't think that you're going to be able to handle this, or if the state vet doesn't think you're going to handle it, and they talk to the DNR guys, this contractor will show up. Now, I had that contractor working for me on one of the hazardous waste sites I managed when I worked with DNR. It cost the state $75 just for the guy to put on his overalls, his gloves, and his jacket that said Tetra Tech or whatever on it. It cost $75 for him to drive a car out. The mechanic who drove the work truck out, it was $150 for the work truck. Okay, so you see how these things are all going. You don't want to be paying these rates, so you want to have that plan available so when the DNR guy or the state vet gets there and says, can you handle this? You say, yes, I've got an emergency action plan. It's all in place and we're going forward. And you want to get those people calmed down and out of there as quick as you can. Okay, things you got to think about though. When we're having to drag, and I came up 100 dead pigs out. We got 2,400 to go. I'm getting worried about time. We're not figuring out how to do it. Okay, how are you going to get all those pigs out of the barn? I found out you don't drag dead pigs very long when you're a 50-year-old man with bad knees. Okay, I drugged 2 pigs, and it took me 3 weeks to recuperate. And I don't know how you guys do it on a daily basis, and I sure couldn't do it with a bunch of them. Okay, what we ended up doing with them, Bob, I'm running long on time.
You got 10 minutes.
10 minutes? I really need to go then. Okay. What we did on this one, and again, why I wish we'd save pictures. Okay, not a favored message or favored way to do it. Got a lawnmower out here dragging pig. Yeah, it kind of works. What about a 4-wheeler? Anybody use that? That's what we did on this one. Saved the day. Cut 2 studs out of the sidewall, cut the bird wire out, built a dirt ramp, took some plywood, nailed a cattle panel on the inside of the traction. And we were talking about neighbor notification earlier. This guy called one of his neighbors who actually was on the Mennonite relief services for that area. And at 8:30, I was getting worried and wanting to call in the state people. At 9 p.m., 72 Mennonite guys showed up. They all got off work, got done milking, whatever, they showed up. And by 11:30 p.m., they pulled the last dead pig out. It was amazing. In fact, I went up to help load dead pigs, and I thought they were going to grab me by the ankles and drag me out, so I got out of the way. What they started doing was running 4-wheelers in and out. We found out you cannot move pigs fast enough with a dead cart to get it done. They would hook up 2 dead pigs on a 4-wheeler, run that thing out of the barn, ran them out, drug them to the pile, unhooked, ran back in, somebody else hooked up. The only thing we had to watch out was that we didn't have 2 of them trying to get in and out the door, because I learned something about young men when they're working together. They're very competitive. They don't back down.
So they went both ways in that one ramp.
Yep. It took a traffic cop right there. Otherwise, we would have had head-ons. They were excited. These guys were doing an excellent job. Okay, neighbor notification. Like I said, they can be your best friend or your worst enemy. Want to hit real quick here. If I don't get to this other stuff, I've hit the really important things about this. I think I've kind of got you all motivated, but I want to tell you, prevention, far better than a response. Regularly test your equipment, your alarms, all of that stuff. Try out this disaster plan. If you got 9 guys on your plan that you're going to call to come in and help you, you need to call sometime and see if they'll show up. Make sure they'll still be there. Because if you've got 9 guys listed on a plan and they're all gone, it doesn't help a bit. Okay, what do you see about that picture you like? Part of preventing emergencies. What do you dislike?
Not ready.
No generator, no tractor.
No PTO shaft put on, not wired up.
There you go. No transfer wire going from PTO that way to go.
I wish I had some candy bars because you guys really deserve them. Because you guys hit all of it on the head. This guy had a tractor a half an hour from the site. He didn't have the PTO shaft. Nice brand new generator, nice transfer equipment. We found out later he didn't even have the wires to hook it up. Didn't have wires available. Couldn't hook it up. And what, we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so, you need to try all this stuff out, make it work. So we've started making all of our producers check they try their systems out. They try it once a week. Try the generator out if it's an auto start. Make sure you make all these things work. Now, what happened in that particular situation we ran into, there was a phone alarm that had been disabled. So that's why we started telling people once a week you check that alarm system right along with generators and all that. Real important stuff. We're going to switch gears a little. Oh, if you don't, you could end up paying the state to do this for you. You don't want to do that. We're not going to get to challenge 2 very much, but I will tell you real fast. Manure spills are probably the next most likely thing. This is where the state gets really, really excited. You need to notify DNR. Becomes a discharge when you lose control of that manure. If you have any question, report. But once you lose control, if it crosses a property line or if it gets into a ditch and it's got water that goes to waters of the state, you need to report. There is a requirement for that, even if you don't have a CAFO permit. No minimum quantity. If somebody can see it, and if somebody's going to see it, they're probably going to complain about it. You want to be the first one to notify DNR. First thing to do, stop the flow of manure. I tell folks, if you find a manure spill, as you're walking towards it, you need to have your cell phone out. You need to be calling, in Cargill people's place, they need to be calling me. If you're not with a company, then you probably need to be calling DNR. Don't wait. We had a producer that waited. He had a discharge at 10 in the morning. He didn't call our folks until 9 that night. In the meantime, manure kept going downhill. He turned what would have been a pain-in-the-neck incident into about a $50,000 fine and about $100,000 in natural resource damages because he waited until the manure hit the creek before he called. We could have had other producers in helping him blocking that stream. Another thing I want to tell you about manure spills. Again, notify real quick. I'll just say it here real quick. Everybody needs a shovel when they're dealing with a manure spill. What the shovel is for is you jam it in the ground and you lean on it as you watch your tractors and your power equipment work. You can't move enough dirt to stop a manure spill with a shovel. If you have a spill, you need to bring in massive stuff. Dozers, tractors with blades, loaders, everything you can find. Block that stuff off and then start pumping it back up the hill or start land applying it. Okay, don't think you're going to stop a manure spill with just a couple of guys and some hand equipment. It doesn't work. You need to have equipment ready to go. And again, that's something you got to plan for. You got to know the spots where you can go cut this stuff off. You got to know where you can get your equipment. Real quick, cost of ignoring farm safety. I'm going to burn through this one real fast. Somebody said they didn't like that. What do you dislike about that?
Or it's been turned over. It's not a good sign.
Not a good sign. Tanker turned over. Why? You can find out the root cause of something with asking about five questions. Why did the tanker turn over? Because it started fishtailing. Why did it fishtail? Because it was going downhill faster than the tractor that was pulling it. Well, why was it going faster than the tractor? Because the guy didn't use his brakes. Why didn't he use the brakes? They weren't hooked up. Don't know for sure whether they didn't work or he just didn't hook them up, but that's scary. That spreader right there got turned over. You can see the damage to it. Popped 2 tires. Those tires are $3,800 each, conservatively. It climbed up on the rear duals on a John Deere. I think it was a 72. It was in a 4-wheel drive John Deere. Climbed up on the back of it. Popped one of the tires on the tractor. Kind of expensive day. I called to find out about it. 7,300 gallon tank, $65,000 worth of damage. We did some more estimates on it. When it started fishtailing, thank goodness the hitch broke. And that caused the auto steer, caused the wheels to turn and turned the trailer sideways so it didn't climb up the tractor into the cab with the driver. When we went all through it, $100,000 worth of damage with lost time, with repair costs and everything, all for about 10 minutes. $10,000 a minute that he could have cut this off. Bottom line, safety pays. You need to prevent accidents rather than dealing with them. You need to have an emergency plan for dealing with these when they do happen.